Around 48,000 years ago, at the edge of a forest clearing in what's now southern Germany, an apex predator stalked its prey. The male cave lion was old, yet still fierce. He'd used his powerful claws and fangs to kill hundreds of times before, over as many years at the very top of the Eurasian food chain. From reindeer to bison to young woolly rhinos and even cave bears, few Ice Age mammals had been safe from this ferocious megacarnivore in his prime. But though he didn't know it, today he wasn't the predator, he was the prey. And as he lay resting in the afternoon sun, gathering strength for his next hunt, another hungry carnivore slowly crept up behind him and closed in for the kill. A spear was suddenly thrust deep into the left side of his body, piercing his lungs and other vital organs, and killing him before he even had the chance to fight back. After a lifetime as a hunter, he had found himself hunted down by a species that had risen to replace him as the new apex predator of Eurasia, Homo neanderthalensis. But just like that poor cave lion, the Neanderthals wouldn't be able to hold on to the apex predator crown forever. Eventually, they too would be dethroned. And while climbing to the summit of the Eurasian food chain was one of the Neanderthals' most impressive evolutionary feats, in the end, it may have actually been what doomed them. Our view of the Neanderthals has changed a lot over the years. For a long time, they were portrayed as stupid cavemen and were almost totally animalistic. But over the last few decades, as more traces of their existence have been found, we've come to see them in a much more human light. As we've explained before, here on Eons, it's now thought that they were capable of complex behaviors and culture, and constructing things like tools and jewelry. They may have even made art and buried their dead. But at the same time, recent evidence has also shown that while they weren't just dumb brutes, they could still be incredibly brutal when needed. Because the fossil record shows that over their 300,000 years or so of evolving alongside the Ice Age beast of Eurasia, Neanderthals became just really ridiculously good at killing things. We found evidence of them actively hunting species that likely had no other predators as adults, things that under normal circumstances just did not get hunted. Take the straight-tusked elephant, Paleoloxodon antiquus, for example, which could reach twice the size of today's African elephants. They were the largest land animals on Earth across the entire Pleistocene epoch, but even they weren't safe from the Neanderthals. In 2023, researchers published evidence from a site in Germany dating to around 125,000 years ago, showing that Neanderthal communities actively hunted adult Paleoloxodon that weighed up to 13 tons each. And the fossil evidence of hunting and butchering those elephants at this particular site spanned at least 2,000 years, practiced by dozens of generations of Neanderthals, the only kind of humans known to be living in Europe back then. The researchers found similar cut mark patterns on the bones of over 50 Paleoloxodon individuals over this time period. And they could tell that this wasn't a case of the Neanderthals simply scavenging the ones that were already dead, because there was a bias towards older males, which would have been easier to hunt, seeing as older males are usually solitary in elephant societies rather than being protected by a herd. And the fact that Neanderthals had a long-standing culture of hunting giant elephants actually tells us quite a lot about them. Like, we previously thought that they only lived in small groups and were highly mobile, rarely staying put in any one place for long. But sites like this that preserve so much Neanderthal activity over so many generations show that they also clearly had favorite spots to spend a lot of their time, maybe even staying put there year-round. And they must have sometimes come together in large numbers because hunting down these enormous animals would have required the combined skill, coordination, and physical strength of many individuals, as would have butchering a carcass of that size, which researchers estimated would have taken multiple days, even if dozens of Neanderthals were working together. And occasionally teaming up in large numbers would definitely pay off, seeing as a single elephant could have fed 100 Neanderthals for nearly a month. From the cut marks on the bones, we even see evidence that they were harvesting the fatty cushion pads at the soles of the elephant's feet. And it would have been no mean feat getting all that feet meat. Now, you can learn a lot about species from the range of animals it hunted. And we have evidence of Neanderthals hunting everything from Paleoloxodon and mammoths to bison to rhinos to cave bears, right down the food chain to crabs and roosting cave birds. So the fact that Neanderthals in different places at different times hunted basically everything that moved gives us a valuable insight into the ecological niche that they filled in their environment. And that niche was meat-hungry apex predator. Sure, they would have foraged for plant foods too, but studies of isotopes in their bones, which preserve information about their diets, have generally confirmed that the vast majority of their food came from meat, primarily from big herbivores. And they had some key traits that may have made them a good fit for this particular niche. For one, they had stocky and muscular bodies, which means that the average Neanderthal was probably pretty strong, helpful for overpowering prey. Plus, we know that with bodies that heavily built, they must have needed to consume a few hundred more calories every day than the average Homo sapiens. Combined with their intelligence, teamwork, and tool use, these traits position them to become some of the most impressive predators that Pleistocene Eurasia had ever seen. They even preyed on other apex predators, like that 48,000-year-old cave lion we mentioned earlier. A reanalysis of its skeleton, which researchers published in 2023, revealed the spear puncture wound and the cut marks left behind after the Neanderthals killed and butchered it. Much like Paleoloxodon, this was yet another species that had basically no other known predators until the Neanderthals showed up in Eurasia. Clearly, we didn't just underestimate the Neanderthals' capacity for emotion, reason, and art. We also underestimated just how skilled at hunting our apex predator cousins had become after hundreds of thousands of years rising to the top of the Eurasian food chain. Which leads us to the inevitable question. If they were such an ecological success story, why did they vanish entirely around 40,000 years ago? Well, the truth is, we just don't know for sure. But we do know that their extinction occurred not long after another predator emerged on the scene in Eurasia a little over 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens. And perhaps this town simply wasn't big enough for the both of us. See, one hypothesis for the demise of the Neanderthals is conflict with Homo sapiens. And that could have taken the form of either direct conflict or ecological conflict, in which we pushed them out of their top spot of the food chain, driving them to extinction through competition. And this idea is definitely plausible because we know that our hunting style was distinct from theirs, and it may have given us a competitive advantage as predators. For example, Neanderthals are thought to have been mostly ambush predators, using spears and clubs to injure their prey up close. In contrast, us Homo sapiens, with our more slender build, were especially good at persistence hunting, chasing down prey over long distances to tire them out. And we use projectile weapons like bows and arrows to injure and kill from a distance. In fact, the very earliest Homo sapiens remains currently known in Europe, from a cave in France dated to around 54,000 years ago and published in 2022, come complete with a bunch of stone arrowheads. So even during our earliest incursions into Neanderthal territory, we had already developed some form of archery. Other than occasionally lobbing their spears at their targets, though, Neanderthals aren't thought to have used any projectile weapons at all. And as far as we can tell, they don't seem to have adopted the technology after encountering us either. Plus, we likely had a broader dietary range than the Neanderthals, as well as lower caloric needs in general. So our more effective hunting strategies, combined with our more versatile diets, may have simply helped us outcompete them after arriving on the scene. But there's another possibility too. Perhaps conflict and/or competition with us wasn't the main driving force behind their extinction. Perhaps it was wider changes in the late Pleistocene climate and environment, which we also know occurred around that time. See, between 40,000 and 44,000 years ago, Europe underwent a series of rapid cooling periods, which would have replaced forests with grasslands in many parts of the continent. And some researchers have argued for a causal link between these sudden environmental shifts and the extinction of the Neanderthals as a whole, whose youngest known remains also date to around this time. Even in this scenario, their hard-won apex predator status may have still been what doomed them. Because from an ecological perspective, the top of the food chain is a pretty wobbly place to sit. When environmental conditions change, apex predators are often amongst the most vulnerable to extinction. They rely on all the elements of the food chain below them to be functioning well enough to support them. It's something we see today with modern predators like big cats. For populations to thrive, they require large habitats and large numbers of prey. When they begin to lose significant amounts of either, their numbers can rapidly crash. And this same process may have played out with the Neanderthals, as their prey-rich forested hunting spots were replaced by more sparsely populated open grasslands instead. So while the Neanderthals' rise to apex predator status was a huge evolutionary success story, it may have also been what doomed them. Either by setting them up to eventually directly compete with us for the same ecological niche, or simply by occupying an especially precarious spot on the food chain, a spot that made them highly vulnerable to environmental shocks. We may never know the full story of their demise for sure, but the story of Neanderthals in their prime is recorded in the broken and butchered bones of their prey that litter the Pleistocene fossil record of Eurasia. Bones that tell the tale of a time when, in a world full of colossal elephants and giant lions, it was a species of stocky, cunning, and very hungry primates that ruled.
A question we're asked a lot here on Eons is how long could a human survive if they were dropped into a particular period of the geologic past? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about on the second season of the Eons podcast. Each episode will look at a time period from all angles. We'll cover apex predators, food sources, environmental hazards, and massive climatic events. Join me, Callie Moore, as I take Michelle Barboza Ramirez, Gabriel Santos, Blake DiPastino, and others into the past. Eons Surviving Deep Time is available now at youtube.com/eons and wherever you get your podcasts.
We have the remains from hundreds of Neanderthals, but only a handful of Denisovan fossils have been identified. In the absence of actual body fossils, it's impossible for us to reconstruct their morphology, right? Find out in our episode, The Ancient Human Species with a Missing Body. We gotta thank this month's apex eontologists.
Addie, Annie and Eric Higgins, Carl Woeful, Jake Hart, John Davidson Ng, Juan M., Melanie Lan Carneville, Nico Robin, and Raphael Haas.
By becoming an Eonite at patreon.com/eons, you can get fun perks like access to behind-the-scenes content, including clips from Eons shoots. And as always, thank you for joining me in the Ken Barnes studio. Subscribe at youtube.com/eons for more Pleistocene people. I see Paige laughing. The line is next. I know it's next. And it would have been no mean feat getting all that feet meat. I'm gonna do that another time. I just needed to get it out into the world. And it would have been no mean feat getting all that feet meat. Forehead!
Oh, it's so good.
Did I maintain a straight face long enough?
I think you did it. You did it. Yeah.